Baruchim Aboim. Welcome to our introductory presentation of Masechtas Eruvin. Masechtas Eruvin, in a way, can be seen and understood as an extension of the last of the Lamates Malachas discussed in Masechtas Shabbos, Malachas Haitzah. The Isser of Haitzah min HaTorah includes the prohibition to transfer an object from Rishus HaYachid, a private domain, to Rishus HaRam, a public domain, and vice versa, transferring an object from Rishus HaRam to Rishus HaYachid. The Gemara Daf Chaf Aleph teaches that in addition to the above Isser min HaTorah, Shloimo HaMelech was geyser shalei lo hitzi mishus hayachid l'shus hayachid chavere. That even carrying from one's own rishus hayachid to another person's rishus hayachid should also be aser, as Rashi explains. Las isyog v'harchaka le'isur Torah shlo yav v'lahatim mishus harabim l'shus hayachid. And along with this gezerah, Shloimo HaMelech included a takana that would allow for ways to get around this gezerah, and that is by instituting a mitzvah aseh midrabanan of making an erev. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mishmol. B'shasha tikin Shloimo HaMelech Eruvin v'natilas idam yatsa baskal v'amra b'ni imchacham libcha yisamach libi gam ani, showing how much the Rebbeinu Shalom approved of his takana. Takanath Shloimo HaMelech. Understanding Shloimo HaMelech's takana. Shloimo HaMelech was primarily concerned that by allowing carrying from one person's private rishus hayachid to another rishus hayachid, it would be seen as no different than carrying from any one rishus to another, and this could lead to carrying from rishus hayachid to rishus haram. And this would be especially true if two homeowners shared one courtyard, as was common practice in those days. Carrying from one of those homes into the shared courtyard, while min HaTorah both are rishus hayachid, and it is permitted, nevertheless, the use of a shared courtyard is not on the same level as a private home or private courtyard, and could easily be interpreted as two different types of rishuyas. The same holds true for the many other types of rishus hayachid that the Gemara discusses, such as ginois, gagois, v'kathifas, all of which, if fenced in, are a rishus hayachid. While this is a three-year machlekes on how to categorize each of them, the halacha follows Reb Shimon, who holds that a private home and its chatzar is in its own category, and all other types of rishus hayachid are in their own separate category. Therefore, Shloimo HaMelech was geyser that you may not carry an item from your private home or chatzar to any other area, even if they are rishus hayachid, unless you make an erev. And this is called Eiruvi Chatzeros. Our Masechta focuses primarily on the two types of Eruvin that are related to Shabbos, and they are Eiruvi Chatzeros and Eiruvi Techumen. In this first part of this presentation, we'll be dealing with many of the general klolim of Eiruvi Chatzeros, and then later in part 2, we'll discuss the klolim as they relate to Eiruvi Techumen. Contrary to popular belief, the word Eruvin does not refer to the setting up of an Eruv or mechitzas around one's property in order to turn it into a rishus hayachid. The more correct term for that is hechsher rishuyas or tikkun rishuyas, which means setting up proper or kosher mechitzas around the property for it to be classified as a rishus hayachid. It is only in the area that already has proper mechitzas that an eruv can be effective. The idea of an eruv, in its purest sense of the word, is to take separately owned private properties and combine them through a shared eruv, thus creating a halacha, a single entity, where one may carry from any one of those houses into a common chatzar, and from the chatzar into any one of the other houses. So let's explain. The way housing was laid out in ancient times, during the times of the Gemara, was that numerous single private houses would share a common chatzar or courtyard that would be surrounded by walls for some added privacy from the outside world, to be used and shared among those homeowners. It was this courtyard that Shloimo HaMelech was concerned about when he was geyser that we may not carry there, because since it was used by many people from many different homes, it becomes somewhat of a public area. Therefore, someone might assume that it is no different than the rishus harabim, and that you may carry from there into a real rishus harabim. He was therefore mesaken Eiruvi Chatzeros, that each homeowner whose house opened into the courtyard should either bring a loaf of bread or chip into a loaf of bread and place that bread into one of the homes, thereby in a sense declaring kulanu ma'arvin, we're all combined together. V'oichel echad l'kulanu, and we all share in one food. V'arei anu kulanu rishus echad, and we're therefore one rishus. In other words, this courtyard is now owned by one entity, thereby eliminating the possibility that someone might confuse this with a rishus harab. Another way of making an erev is through zikui, where one of the homeowners can donate the bread and gift an equal part of it to each homeowner, even shalom edas bailam, even without their immediate knowledge, because we say zachan adam shalom b'fanav. The original owner of the bread would hand the bread over to another person who would make a kinyan hagbah, lift the bread one tefach off the ground, and declare hareza l'chol b'nei hachatzer. The eruv, or bread, was then placed into one of the houses and, as is the minhag today, kept there for a full year or for as long as the eruv is still edible. All homeowners within a chatzar must be included in this eruv, In other words, each homeowner must agree to give up his exclusive ownership rights for the benefit of the group. However, if there was one homeowner who was either forgotten about, or for whatever reason refuses to join, or if a non-Jew owned one of the houses in the Chatzar, this could create serious complications which would invalidate the Eruv. All of these are major sugyas discussed in the 6th and 7th parak. The rationale behind the Eruv is that by having all the homeowners partner in this one Eruv, their separate properties are now considered as one Rishus. And how this is actually accomplished is a machlekes discussed on Daf Mem Tes. Shmuel holds Eruv Mishum Kinyan. By partnering in the Eruv, each homeowner requires a shiur in all the houses, while Rava holds that Eruv Mishum Dira. Each homeowner is a partner in the bread, not in the houses. And since a person's mind is focused on where his bread is, it is considered as if they now all live in that one house. The Gemara discusses the halachic ramifications of this machlekes. Mavoi. Another feature in the way houses were laid out in those times was that instead of the chatzar opening directly to a public area, or Rishus Harabim, numerous separate chatzeros would open to an alleyway, or side road called a mavoi, which would then lead out to the main road, the Rishus Harabim. Here too, Chazal instituted that in order for the numerous Bnei Chatzeros to be allowed to carry from their homes through the Chatzeros and into this Mavoi, they would need to first make an Eruv that would partner all the homeowners of all the Chatzeros. And this Eruv is called Shituf Mavais, which in essence declares that all the homeowners of the numerous Chatzeros open to this Mavoi are partners in one entity, one Rishus HaYachid. However, all the above is only possible if each chatzar as well as the mavoi has a valid mechitza around them so that they are legitimate Rishus HaYachid D'Oraisa. And it is the dimensions and layout of these mechitzas and how they need to be corrected that the first two parakim of our Masechta deals with. The Gemara teaches in Masechta Shabbos Daf Vav, Ton Rabban, Arba Rishuyas L'Shabbos, Rishus HaYachid, Rishus Harabim, Carmelis, Malkum P'tur. Rishus HaYachid, a private domain, an area enclosed by a fence or wall of at least 10 tefachim high and has a dimension of at least 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. Other forms of Rishus HaYachid are a bar, a ditch of 10 tefachim deep with a dimension of 4 by 4 tefachim, or a tel, a natural mound of earth that rises 10 tefachim with a dimension on top of 4 by 4 tefachim. Rishus Harabim, a public area, a road, highway, or public area that is open on both ends, does not have a roof and is at least 16 amos wide. Also, according to some, it must have at least 600,000 people passing through it daily. These parameters are based on the Machne Yisrael in the Midbar, in which 600,000 Yidden lived, did not have a roof, its roads were open on both ends, and were 16 amos wide. That it needed to be 16 amos wide was based on the width of 2 wagons that were loaded with the krushim, the boards that made up the walls of the Mishkan. 2 wagons traveled side by side as the Yidden wandered in the Midbar. Another feature of Rishus Harabim is that it extends upward only until 10 tefachim. Above 10 tefachim is a Malkum P'tur. Min HaTorah is asked to transfer an item from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus Harabim, and from Rishus Harabim to Rishus HaYachid, and also to carry an item 4 amos within the Rishus Harabim. Carmelis. A carmelis is an open area that cannot be classified as Rishus Harabim because it lacks one of the necessary conditions of Rishus Harabim, and cannot be classified as a Rishus HaYachid because it does not have the required mechitzas. Therefore, because in fact it is neither an exclusive private area nor a public area, the Chum were geizer that it should have the chumras of both, that it is asur midrabanan to transfer an object from a carmelis to either Rishus HaYachid or Rishus Harabim, and vice versa. It is also asur midrabanan to carry an item 4 amos within the carmelis. Malkum P'tur. On a basic level, a Malkum P'tur is a separate area within Rishus Harabim that is less than 4 by 4 tefachim wide and between 3 by 9 tefachim high above the ground, such as a large rock or tree stump. Placing an item onto it either from Rishus HaYachid or from Rishus Harabim is mutter l'ketchila. However, lahaver chayvetz from Rishus Harabim l'Rishus HaYachid derech Malkum P'tur is also midrabanan. One is not allowed to place an item onto the Malkum P'tur with the intention of then transferring it into another Rishus. A few other areas that resemble a Rishus HaYachid are karfav shlehukuf l'shem dira. A karfav is a large open area yosem bebeis hasayim outside the city, such as a large garden or storage space that has proper mechitzas. However, since lehukuf l'shem dira, the mechitzas were not set up for residential use, it is considered as a carmelis, and one may not carry in it more than daled amos. The share of beis hasayim is derived from the Chatzar Mishkan, which covered an area of 50 amos by 100 amos. If squared off, this would translate to an area of shivim amos v'shiraim, 70 plus 4 tfachim by 70 amos plus 4 tfachim square. Rechava. A rechava is a lot behind one's house that has proper mechitzas, but did not originally have a direct entrance to it from the house. If the owner first opened a door from his house to the rechava and then later built a mechitza around it, it is considered as hukuf ladira and one may carry there. However, if the mechitza was first built and only later the owner opens a door into it, it is considered as loy hukuf ladira and they may not carry in it more than daled amos. Tikkun mechitzas. So what is a valid mechitza and how can we misaken or fix up a mechitza that is deficient? A proper mechitza consists of a partition such as a wall of 10 tefachim high that encloses the area. Min HaTorah, according to most Rishonim, once an area is surrounded by shalosh mechitzas, 3 walls, the area is a reshus hayachim min HaTorah. However, the Chacham or Geizer that without a 4th wall, it is usher to carry there. However, this 4th wall does not need to be a full wall. Rather, it is enough that it has either a lechi or kaira or pasen or tzuras HaPesach, depending on the circumstances. Mavei Sasim. A Mavei Sasim, an alleyway which is surrounded by 3 mechitzas and open on one side to Rishus Rabbim, is the easiest Rishus to be misaken. If the open side has even a small amount of wall protruding into their entrance, called gifuf, as long as the opening is less than 10 amas, nothing needs to be done, and one may carry in this mavei because this opening is considered a pesach, a doorway. If, however, the entrance to the mavei is completely open, even though its opening is less than 10 amas, it's not considered a pesach, so what needs to be done to permit carrying in the mavei is to place a lechi, a thin pole 10 tvachim high on one side of the entrance to the mavei, or to place a kaira, a crossbeam, over the entrance to the mavei. What do the lechi or kaira accomplish? On Daf Rav Abaye says that lechi mishum bechitza. A Rava holds lechi mishum heker, so that people should be reminded as to where the mavei ends. According to Abaye, the lechi is mishum bechitza. Even if the lechi was oymin me'elav, was there naturally, such as a tree growing in that spot, it's perfectly fine lechi. However, according to Rava, the lechi mishum heker, then it can only act as a heker if it was placed there intentionally by man for this purpose. Also, like the lechi should be placed on the inside of the side wall of the mavei, so that it should be seen by those standing in the mavei. We also find a similar machlekes in reference to the kaira and daf ches. Rava holds kaira mishum mechitza, and Rava holds kaira mishum heker. One effect of this machlekes can be why the Chacham hold in the first Mishnah of our Masechta that mavei should gavoy l'mal mesrim amma yemayit. The kaira cannot be placed higher than 20 amas because lo shalta be'eni. People will just not notice if it's so high, and is therefore no longer an effective heker. And also, according to Rava, a kaira placed on a sharp angle is not good since it loses its ability to act as a heker. Therefore, he holds mavei should tzide echad arch, but tzide echad katzer, ein manich as a kaira el keneged a katzer. Rather, it must be placed in line with the end of the short wall. Other halachas regarding a lechi and kaira are, a lechi, according to the Chacham, does not have a shiur as to how wide or thick it needs to be. Even a kol shu is fine. While Rabbi Yossi holds the shiur is shleish tefachim. A kaira needs to be at least 1 tefach wide, which is the shiur of kadei lekabel riach, wide enough to hold a brick of 1.5 tefachim, even if in reality it's not physically strong enough to actually hold it up, according to Rabbi Yehuda on Daf Yud Gimel. Also, a lechi must be placed within 3 tefachim of the wall, which is the shiur of Lavid, referring to the halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that open space up to 3 tefachim is considered closed and attached to the side wall, similar to what we find by a sukkah, that up to 3 tefach gap in the sukkah, its walls or its schach, the sukkah is kosher. And this same holds true for the kaira. If the kaira falls short of reaching across the opening up to 3 tefachim, we say lava and it's kosher. And lastly, a kaira must not be placed 20 amas above the ground, as mentioned earlier. All the above was regarding a mavei sasim, which has 3 kosher mechitzas. However, if the mavei is open to the Rishus Rabbim at both ends, in other words, it has only 2 parallel mechitzas, such a mavei is called a mavei mefulish. In order to be allowed to carry the mavei mefulish, we first need to turn it into Rishus Hayachid. And how to accomplish this, besides closing off one open side with an actual wall, is a 3-way machlekes in the Brais on Davav. Tanakama holds Eised Tzuras HaPesach Mikan, V'lechi Eikar Mikan. We must construct a Tzuras HaPesach on one end, and then correct the other end with either a lechi or kaira as any mavei sas. Beishami hold Eised Delis Mikan V'Delis Mikan. Ukshur Yoytze V'Nichnes Noil. We must put up doors on both sides and actually close them when not in use. The Beisil hold Eised Delis Mikan. We must put up doors on one side, which does not need to be closed. V'lechi Eikar Mikan. Shmuel holds halacha Beisil that we need a delis on one of the open sides. And the Shulchan Aruch passes like Rav, who holds that halacha Getanakama, that we only needed Tzuras HaPesach on one of the open sides. Another type of mavei mefulish discussed in the Gemara is a mavei akum, where the mavei is L-shaped. If both sides open to the Rishus Rabbim, then it is treated as a mefulish ba'akmimis, like 2 open maveis that meet at the inside corner, and therefore require a Tzuras HaPesach on that corner, plus a lechi ekara on both open ends. A Tzuras HaPesach is considered a mechitza l'chol dinei Torah, and is defined as kana mekan v'kan mekan v'kan al gabeim. one pole on each end with a crossbeam that runs over them. While the two poles must be beria kilakabel del shalkash, strong enough to hang a light door from it, the kanal gabain can even be just a simple string as we do today, as long as it crosses over the top of the poles and not on its sides, and like its chila should be tight and not sag. Also with regards to tzuras HaPesach, even if the kana mikan or kana mikan do not reach up all the way to the kanal gabain, it's still a kosher tzuras HaPesach as long as the kanal gabain lines up perfectly with the kana mikan, And that is because of another halacha Mishmei Sinai, which teaches that when a vertical pole or wall doesn't reach the roof, we say good asig, that once a mechitza or kana is 10 tefachim high, we see them as extending up to the sky. Another application of this halacha Mishmei Sinai would be if one wishes to carry on the surface of a flat roof of a house that has no overhang. Here too we say good asig that the walls from the below extend upwards to give it mechitzas on all four sides of the roof. Another similar halacha Mishmei Sinai, but with an opposite effect, is good achas, where if a mechitza of 10 tefachim is suspended above the ground, we view this mechitza as if it extends down to the ground. However, good achas can only be applied where there is no issue of gedoyim boikim bay, which means that if there's an open space on the ground of 3 tefachim, this leaves enough room for young goats to crawl underneath and would invalidate the mechitza. This is a sugi discussed in Masechta Shabbos, Daf Kofal. Chatzar. The above kula where Chazal allowed the fourth wall of Rishus Yachid to be closed off with either a lechi or kair was only for a mavoi. However, to close up the fourth wall of a chatzar, only a tzuras HaPesach or a pas would suffice. A tzuras HaPesach is as described earlier. Kana mikan, v'kana mikan, v'kana al gabein. A pas is either a board of 4 tefachim wide by 10 tefachim high that is placed on one side of the opening, or two pasim, similar to two lechis, placed on opposite sides of the opening. Also, if a small part of the fourth wall exists and protrudes 4 tefachim, this too can act as a pas. And for that matter, if there were two minimal protrusions from both sides of the opening, they too can act as two pasim. The reason why Chazal were more machmer with a chatzar than with the mavoi is because a chatzar is more of a private area than a mavoi, as it is shared by just a few close neighbors. Therefore, Chazal required stronger tikkunim to keep it more private. All the methods of being masak and mechitzas mentioned until here are only so if the pirza, the opening, is less than 10 amas. However, if the pirza is more than 10 amas, takin tehu rak b'tzuras HaPesach. Only tzuras HaPesach will suffice. Another halacha which we've seen and not yet mentioned is pi tikr yord b'seisim. A house that some of its walls caved in, even if the pirza is more than 10 amas, we say pi tikr yord b'seisim, that the edge of the roof extends downwards to create a wall. Paratzis b'mechitzas. If a mechitza breaks or develops paratzis, breaches, when does it need to be fixed and when not? The basic rule is that we look at the percentage of the wall that is breached and the percentage that is standing. Oymin meruba ala parts. Mechitza has numerous paratzis, but the total width of all the standing parts of the wall is more than the total width of all the paratzis. The mechitza is kosher and does not need any tikkun. But this is only if each pirza is less than 10 amas, because the pirza is viewed as a pesach, a doorway. However, if the pirza is more than 10 amas, even though the mechitza is still oymin meruba ala parts, this pirza apostles the entire mechitza. Since such a pirza can no longer be viewed on its own as a pesach, therefore tzuras HaPesach must be erected around the pirza. And the same holds true if haparts meruba ala oymed, where the pratzis are greater than the oymed, the standing part of the mechitza. If left as is, the mechitza is puzzle. However, it can be fixed by constructing a tzuras HaPesach in place of the pirza. So let's bring all these concepts together. In the case we have a classic setup of a mavoi sasim that has 2 chatzeros on its 2 sides, with each chatzar consisting of at least 2 houses surrounded by mechitzas that are at least 10 tefachim high. As long as the openings from the chatzeros into the mavoi are less than 10 amas wide, they're considered doorways and no adjustment needs to be made to them. The homeowners of each chatzar make their own Eruvin Chatzeros and are now permitted to carry within their chatzar. And now, if they want to carry into the mavoi or into any one of the other chatzeros which are attached through the mavoi, they would need to make another Eruv between all the chatzeros. And this Eruv is called Shetufa Mavois. However, before being able to make a Shetufa Mavois, they would first need to make sure that the mechitzas around the mavoi are in order. If the entrance to the mavoi is completely open to Rishus Rabbim and is less than 10 amas wide, all they need to do is either place a kaira, a crossbeam over the entrance, or a lechi of 10 tefachim high at the entrance. If, however, the mavoi is wider than 10 amas, let's say 15 amas, then before they can make a Shetufa Mavois, the entrance must be narrowed to at least 10 amas. While this can of course be accomplished by placing a 5 amas wide pas against one wall, thus effectively closing the opening to 10 amas, but even if they only have a pas of 3 amas wide, they can place it 2 amas away from the wall and it will still be good because that pas is counted as a 5 amas wall, which is oymed meruba ala pirza. Even though it would seem to create a problem, the asa vir the high gisa umavatale, because the halacha is that the open spaces on both sides of a small wall are mavatal that part of the wall. This, however, would only happen if both open spaces on each side were larger than the wall between them. However, here one open space is smaller than the 3 amma pas, therefore they're not mavatal the pas. Once this is done, we place a lechi as a hecker on the other wall, and the mavi is ready to go. We may now make shetuva mavais. Now, what if the back wall of our mavi collapsed and is now open to an outside chatzar? A chatzar whose entrance on the opposite side opens to another rishus rab. Amarav. Mavi shenifritz b'milui l'chatzar, the nifritz l'chatzar kenegdai chatzar muteres u'mavi aser. If no parts of the wall remain between them that is noticeable from within the mavi, one is not allowed to carry in the mavi, because the mavi is now considered mefulish l'rishus ha'asrlai, either because the other side of the chatzar is open to a rishus rabbim, or because there is no eruv between the mavi and this chatzar. However, people in the outside chatzar, assuming they made an eruv among themselves, may carry there, because this is their own private chatzar, which is surrounded by proper mechitzas, because from their point of view, this is a case of nira bechutz b'shava b'fnim. The remaining walls on the sides of the pirza, facing the chatzar, are called gefifim, which acts for the chatzar as lechayayim, as a lechi on each side. Therefore, this pirza, as long as it is less than 10 amas wide, is considered for the people in the chatzar as a pesach. The truth of this is that these gefifim, the way we see them here according to some shitas, can also act as l'chayayim for the mavi too, as the halacha is that nir mebechutz b'shava mebefnim nider mishum lechi. Even if a lechi can only be seen from the outside, it is still an effective lechi. However, the Gemara explains that we are talking about a case where the walls of the mavi extended somewhat into the chatzar. Thus, the l'chayayim of the chatzar can no longer act as l'chayayim for the walls of the mavi. Therefore, the people in the mavi may not carry, as the mavi has only 2 mechitzas. In order to be allowed to carry in the mavi, a tzuras ha-pesach would have to be set up at the end of this open wall. If, however, the wall did not collapse completely, and a small section of it still remained on the 2 corners and are visible from inside the mavi, then as long as the opening is less than 10 amas, you may carry in the mavi. And now if they all want to carry into each other's properties, a new shetuva mavais that encompasses them all can be made. Mechitza gerua. Based on the halacha mishbesin of Lavid, one may erect a mechitza around the chatzar made only from thin sticks, shesi, spaced out within 3 tfachim of each other. And the same holds true if one surrounded a chatzar with just 3 strings spaced out horizontally above the floor, eruv, within 3 tfachim of each other. This too would be a valid mechitza minatera based on the halacha mishbesin of Lavid. However, the Chacham considered these mechitzas a mechitza grua, an inferior mechitza, and decreed that when used for a private person, they can only be used for an area less than base asayim. But for a large area, then the mechitza must consist of both shesi, meaning vertical poles, and eruv, horizontal strings. Pasi b'rais. One more method of setting up mechitzas, which utilized many kulas, leniencies, and was permitted exclusively for the Oiler Golem during the times of the Beis Hamikdash, was the use of pasi b'rais. On the way up to Yerushalayim, the animals of the Oiler Golem needed to drink. Bairis, wells, were dug along the roads leading up to Yerushalayim just for this purpose. However, bairis usually at least 4 by 4 tfachim by 10 tfachim deep, which makes it Rosh Hashanah. It would therefore be asked to draw water from the bar in Shabbos to feed the animals which were standing in Rosh Hashanah. Being that this created a real dilemma for the Oiler Golem, who were there only because of the mitzvah, the Chum therefore permitted a minimalistic mechitza to be set up around the bar known as pasi b'rais, which would render the area around the bar a Rosh Hashanah. The Mishnah in the beginning of the second parak writes, Eisin pasan the b'rais arba de yumdin. The yumdin refers to a pair of boards that are each 10 tfachim high by 6 tfachim wide, and were set up one next to the other in an L shape to create a corner. 4 such yumdin were placed around the area of the bar to create a square Rosh Hashanah, where the water can be drawn from the well and placed nearby to feed the animals. So in essence, these yumdin, which according to Remeir in the Mishnah can have a gap of up to 10 amas between them, and according to Rabbi Yehuda can have a gap between them even up to 13 and a third amas, nevertheless, they're considered a valid mechitzas, even though, according to both, this is clearly a case of parts merubah lo'imid. And again, this is because Chacham hikilu l'tzarech Oiler Golem. With this, we conclude the first part of our presentation on Eiruvi Chatzeros. In part 2, we'll Mir Hashem discuss the klalim of Eiruvi Chatzeros.